Hey friends. Gosh, what a mess we're in. I've got to tell you, actually, I probably don't have to tell you because my guess is that you're having this experience too, but this shit is hard. I've been asking people in my life, friends and clients, for details and specifics about how this is hard for them. And it's been interesting to me to hear over and over again people say something to the effect of, "This is really hard for me, but I shouldn't complain because other people have it even worse." And that's what I want to talk about today. The way that comparing our suffering, comparing our challenges, actually harms all of us. Now, of course, we all know that you don't need it to be pandemic time in order to see that some people's lives are harder than others. It's always true. And I think that we're seeing that the pandemic is highlighting and, in fact, increasing the differences that exist. People whose lives were already hard are now harder. And so that's a reality that we face all the time, and that is even more dramatic and exacerbated by the current conditions. I think I hear two things behind the comparison that people are making. The first is a sort of non-judgmental observation of reality. Some people's lives are harder than others. Some people's lives are harder than my own. The other, though, is a sort of comparing my suffering to someone else's, and then if someone else's suffering is worse than mine, using that as sort of a cudgel against myself, as though to say that because someone else's suffering or challenges are bigger than my own, that I don't have space to complain and that I should just be quiet and soldier on. And that is the move that I want to talk about today, because this is a thing that we all have a tendency to do under any circumstances. It doesn't have to be pandemic time for us to do that kind of comparing. And I see this as ultimately harmful to all of us. So I want to talk about it and talk about why. That move, the move of using other people's suffering as a weapon to judge myself, that if someone else's suffering is worse than my own, then I'm a whiner if I complain and I should just buck up and get on with it. This is something that we all have a tendency to do all the time. And that judgment that we direct at ourselves is the same judgment that we direct at other people. So it's a way that we push ourselves out of our own heart. And when we do that, we also create the conditions for pushing other people out of our hearts. So that tendency separates us both from our own inner selves and wisdom, but it also separates us from the people around us. It can be a way that we judge other people as well. We might even say to a friend, well, gosh, you have it hard, but someone else has it harder, so probably you shouldn't complain as much as you are. Or in a more supportive way, we might even make that suggestion as a way of sort of hoping to help to cheer someone up. Like, oh, you've got it worse, you've got it bad, but someone else probably has it worse. And as though that is a way of cheering up someone's difficult situation. But have you ever been in a difficult situation where that kind of observation helped you to feel better? I haven't found one yet. Now, this judging and separating move is actually a small version of the emotional and psychological move that drives systemic injustice. By separating ourselves from the people around us and by alienating ourselves from our own hearts, we create the conditions for a sort of spiritual hunger that is the thing that drives capitalism. So at root, this is a big part of our cultural challenge in the United States and really globally at this moment. When we point this at ourselves, it turns into self-loathing. We might say, I'm such a whiner, why can't I get it together? Other people have it harder and they're getting it together. So it's a way of putting a lot of judgment and just sending it right into our core. When we direct it at other people, it's similarly abusive, to protect ourselves from others' suffering and also to protect ourselves from the painful belief that we don't deserve care. We play a sort of game of suffering Olympics and seem to think that the only person who deserves care and attention is the person whose suffering is worst. But who has the worst suffering, and what does that even mean? So you can see how this is both not useful and, in fact, quite harmful. And it's a way that we turn the other into an enemy, and it's also a way that we turn ourselves into an enemy as well. So what do we do? The answer here is to be able to see what's real, but not judge it. So to see that other people may be suffering more than I am, but not to care so much about the fact that it's more or less, and to see that we're all suffering, and that in fact that suffering is something that unites us rather than something that has to divide us. When I can hold my own pains and struggles in the same space that I can hold and observe others' pains and struggles without worrying about who has it worse, I make room for the wholeness of each person and the wholeness of each of our experience. And then it becomes a way for us to connect with each other and to connect with ourselves in a very human and wonderful way. This is a move towards non-judgmentally accepting both ourselves and the people around us. And that moves the world in a powerfully peaceful and compassionate direction, which then has the wonderful benefit of being a virtuous cycle, because the more soft and gentle and compassionate we can be with ourselves, the more that we can put that out into the world as well. And then that's what comes back to us. This, in turn, lets us use recognition of real difference as a point of action, rather than as a point of shame and judgment inside ourselves. Now, here's a funny thing that happens when we're trying to move our behavior or our attitude in a particular direction. Suddenly, this becomes yet another way to judge ourselves. So, I don't want that to happen in this case. If what you want to do is move in the direction of being more non-judgmental and more open, then using that desire as a weapon against yourself and sort of being like, no, now there's just another way that I am not living up to my hopes and dreams for myself. Well, you're going back and reinforcing the pattern, the deep pattern of judging and separating ourselves that we're trying to change. So how do we approach this? The thing that I have found most helpful here is to approach all of these interactions with curiosity. What's going on for me when I have the urge to be judgmental of myself or of someone around me? What does it feel like? What's happening for me that's driving that move? I don't have a particular destination in mind with these questions. The whole point is to just spend a little curious time with myself and wonder, what's happening? What's going on? What's making me act and feel and behave this way? You don't have to change it. You don't have to vilify yourself for not meeting expectations. You can just be curious about it, the same way that you would be curious about a friend. I promise this can help.